Okay, so good evening to everyone as you join. We appreciate you braving the weather to join us virtually tonight, and pivoting with us if some of you signed up for in-person as we change to a more digital format. Thank you so much. A few housekeeping things before we get started. We will have an opportunity to do some question and answer after our legislative preview that is upcoming. But we're going to ask that you please use the question and answer function. You can see that at the bottom of your screen. That'll allow us to have all the questions in one place. Another thing we're going to ask you all to do is to remember that as we present and as we are going through things, that you always keep your comfort in mind and make sure that you're got a nice warm beverage if you need to, or a nice cool beverage. I feel like on a night tonight, we should all have a hot cocoa, right? Um, we're going to ask also if you could share with us in that Q&A if there's multiple people joining on a single device. That'll let us know how many people we're reaching this evening. And we're really excited to see the reach of this kind of new advocacy-focused programming that we've got coming up. I guess without further ado, we would just ask kind of the last thing to any reporter that might be joining us, anyone who is hoping to publish anything from the info that's covered tonight, that you stay behind after or reach out to us directly if you are going to be sharing any information outside of this format. So thank you so much for your respect in that, and we appreciate your presence here. Without further ado, like I said, I'm going to introduce our brave CEO, our fearless leader, Megan. She's going to join us, and she'll be sharing out a presentation about our legislative preview for 2025. So thank you so much, Megan.
Thank you, Eric. I appreciate, like Eric said, everybody kind of braving the cold, and I'm glad you're home in your warm houses. I actually have a blanket on my lap because in my office, but I can hear the rain falling outside my window. I looked at the participant list a minute ago, and I want to welcome some old friends and some close friends that I see on the list, and I want to welcome some new friends that we have here too. Like Eric said, my name is Megan Desrosiers. I'm the president and CEO of 100 Miles. 100 Miles is going to be 12 years old this year, and we've been working at the Capitol from day one. When we started 100 Miles, we got involved at the Capitol early on because we wanted to build a statewide advocacy group for our coast. And so the presentation I'm going to be sharing with you tonight is it just kind of shows the result of some of our hopes and expectations for this year, and I'm glad you're interested in knowing about it. Before I get into the legislative priorities, I want to give you a little bit of a background about our organization and kind of how we view the lead up to the legislative session. As you know, 100 Miles is an advocacy and education organization. We work to protect Georgia's coast through advocacy, education, and community engagement. And our long-term vision is a coast where people and wildlife and the environment thrive. We all know the coast. Some of us live here. Some of us love it from afar. We know it's special, and we can feel it when we're here. But specifically, the world knows it's special for many reasons, but some of them I'll remind you of tonight. First of all, Georgia's coast is a landscape of hemispheric importance. It was designated that by the Western Hemispheric Shorebird Reserve Network in 2018. And that's because of the amazing habitat that we have for shorebirds, including the red knot and the piping plover. Second, Georgia has 33% of the remaining salt marsh on the East Coast. That equates to about 400,000 acres. So even though our coast is only 100 miles long, we have more salt marsh than any other state on the East Coast. And that's because we have worked to protect that salt marsh through the years, for about 50 years now, actually. Our coast is relatively undeveloped. What that translates to, especially when you're here, is that we have dark skies. We have wonderful wildlife habitat, not just for birds, but for many other important species. And when you come here, we have peace and tranquility. This is important because, as you know, I feel like I'm preaching to the choir, but this is important because as we talk to our legislators and we talk about what we want to protect this gem that people come to experience and that wildlife come to for solitude and sanctuary. And it's a unique asset that we have on our coast. Um, Another thing that we talk about a lot is that Georgia's coast is home to the oldest sea turtle program in the world. We have a vast network of volunteers who work tirelessly during sea turtle season to make sure that this precious species is protected, that the mothers have a place to nest, and that the hatchlings have a safe place to go when they hatch and go towards the ocean. Our working waterfronts contribute to our economy, and that is important, especially at the Capitol. But what we have to continue to remind people at the Capitol is that these working waterfronts really depend on access to clean water and a healthy environment. Our historic communities are important to our state, one, because they are rich in culture and in tradition, but two, because they're also places where people come to learn about the history of our country, to learn about the history of our people. And then finally, because we are different than Florida and South Carolina, it is really important that our legislators understand why the people of Georgia, whether they live in Rome or whether they live in Thomasville or whether they live on St. Simons or in Savannah, why the coast matters. And so that's why I'm really glad that you're here today, because you all represent a diverse geographic area across our coast. And I'm grateful that you are interested in learning about our legislative priorities. Before we talk about our priorities, we have to kind of think about our threats. So at 100 miles, our mission is to protect Georgia's coast. And, the natural question from that is protect it from what? So when we first started 100 miles and ever since then, we kind of continue to revisit these threats. And there's information coming out about them every day. The first threat that we talk about is that land across our coast and our coastal communities is being developed at a rate that is 7 times the rate of our population growth. So think about this in terms of you sitting in the room that you're sitting in. So I'm sitting in my office. That means that if one person came into my office, that we would add 7 offices to this building. That's not a very efficient plan for growing. And that 7 times the rate of developing land that is more than our population growth, that means that we are sprawling out in inefficient patterns. And those inefficient patterns are threatening these things that I mentioned before, the assets. They're threatening our salt marsh. They're threatening our habitat. They're threatening our dark skies. They're threatening our culture. And so this, we call it unbridled growth here at 100 miles. This is what we're working to constrain. It's not that we're anti-population, or anti-land use or anti-development. It's that we need more efficient patterns of growth. And that comes through the regulatory process in many ways. It comes at the state and the local level. What this growth looks like, this is a map of the Savannah urban area in 1974. So these red areas show the urban footprint in the Savannah metropolitan area in the year 1974. Between 1974 and 2008, this is what the 7 times the rate of population growth looks like. So if we extrapolate it out to 2050, this is what our region will look like. So again, one back. This is 2008. This is 2050. In Brunswick, the same model done is, this is what it looked like I have it backwards. This is what it looked like in 1974. This is what it looked like in 2008. And this is what it'll look like in 2050. So this is actually what we're working to combat actively. Similarly, we know that at the same time that we're growing in these inefficient patterns, sea levels along the coast have risen 8 to 10 inches in the past 80 years. We have data right here from Fort Pulaski that shows this trend. This is what it looks like on graphs. So if you look at the relative sea level, which is on the right side of the screen, just shows kind of a linear trend. And that doesn't look so alarming. I mean, you can see the sea level rise. But when you look at the extreme high tide events per year, you can see that it's not linear, that it's actually a lot more dangerous. And what that results in is what we call sunny day flooding. So that means flooding on these days that we have king tides and full moons. And this is sunny day flooding in Brunswick a few years back. And as y'all know who are in Savannah, this is sunny day flooding on Highway 80 out to Tybee Island. These are real problems that our communities are having to deal with. And when you compound those problems with putting growth in the wrong places, and when we have major weather events like hurricanes, all of this kind of comes together to create a perfect storm of catastrophe, unfortunately. So, and it translates into dollars. It translates into dollars for our federal government and for our state government. So between 1900 and 2017, the cost of hurricanes have increased exponentially. Some people say that that could be because the hurricanes are getting stronger and more frequent, which they are. But when you think about that strength and the change to our hurricanes, along with us building homes and structures in the wrong places, that also increases to the cost of the hurricanes. Now, the most recent hurricanes that we had this year and last year aren't on here. So we have to get that data to update this graph. This is some of that flooding from the hurricanes in Brunswick and Savannah. And remember, we weren't direct hits of any of those storms. So this is a problem, a couple of problems that our state legislature is having to deal with. I wanted to just share with you some facts about the session, in addition to the threats, because we have a confined amount of time, a limited amount of time every year to work with the Georgia legislature. So 2025 is the first year of a 2-year session. What that means is that every session, like the last session started in 2023 and went through 2024. If a bill is introduced in 2023, it carries over to 2024. So because the session has only been going on for 1 week, it started last Monday, January 13th, there have been very few bills introduced because none carried over from last year. Every year, the session is 40 days. This year, it's from January 13th to April 4th. There are 180 House members. 100 of them are Republican, 80 are Democratic, and of course that 80 are Democrat. Of course, that changes every year depending on the election. There are 56 senators. 33 are Republican and 23 are Democrat. And crossover day is March 6th. Crossover day is a day by which this year, if a bill is introduced in the Senate or the House, it has to pass the body that it was introduced in for it to be considered by the other body. So let's say a bill is introduced in the House, it has to pass the House by March 6th, or it doesn't get to be considered by the Senate this year. It could carry over, and it would carry over into next year, but it would have to cross over again before crossover day next year. So those are kind of the logistics of how we work. Every year, the session's calendar is different. Every week, the legislature's calendar is different. They have floor sessions usually in the morning, and they have committee meetings usually in the afternoon, but that's not always the case. Sometimes it's flipped, or sometimes, so you really have to watch the agenda, you have to watch the schedule, and you have to pay attention to the specific bills that you're watching. This year, we have some very specific legislative priorities. And to be honest, they're not that different than they are every year. Some of them are. Every year we work towards the protection of the Okefenokee Swamp, and every year we work to make sure our salt marsh is protected. This year we're working on maybe hoping to strengthen some of the EPD permitting processes that are available. And this year we've been told about a North Coast water situation that will be considered by the legislature. And I will walk you through some of those. Before I really get into the bills, I just want to preface this by saying that we don't have any bill numbers yet, because no bills affecting the environment. Well, I should say some bills affecting the environment have been introduced, but none of them are significant enough that will affect the coast in a way that we think warrant spending a lot of time on. So the first one I'll talk to you about is Okefenokee protection. You may remember, maybe you know, that a few years back, a company called Twin Pines put in a permit application to mine for heavy minerals near the Okefenokee Swamp. That company, Twin Pines, has now reduced their permit application to 600 acres, which is still significant, um, of a larger thousands of acre tract of land. And that permit application is being considered by the EPD. A few years after that happened, some legislators in the Capitol were thinking that maybe they could prevent future mining permits from being granted, even though Twin Pines mining permit hasn't been granted yet, if they put forth a bill that would ban future mining permits on Trail Ridge near the swamp. Of course, that sounded great to us. We supported the bill. We worked on it for 2 or 3 years. It was co-signed by 96 members of the House, but it never got a hearing in the House, and therefore it never passed over to the Senate. This year, we are thinking that maybe it didn't get a hearing because it banned mining outright from Trail Ridge. And so this year, we're thinking that perhaps we could ask for a 10-year moratorium on new mining permits. This would give the area a break. It would allow time for the EPD to finish considering the request for the mining permit that Twin Pines put forth, which this ban or moratorium would not affect. And hopefully it would be more palatable to some of the people who are concerned about the economic development limitations that an outright ban would cause in the areas near the swamp. As I said, there's no bill yet, but this is something that we are actively working on and hope to have a bill introduced in the next few weeks. Another issue that we work on every year, as I mentioned, is salt marsh protection. So our goal is to protect Georgia's 400,000 acres of salt marsh. This salt marsh is protected by the Salt Marsh Protection Act. But there is a way that salt marsh can be privatized, and that is if a person claims that they have the ownership of salt marsh through a crown grant, which could have been issued by the King of England or by the governor of Georgia in the 17 or 1800s. And so last year and the year before, there was a bill that was a bad bill, and we fought, that would have made it easier for people to get private ownership of acres and acres of salt marsh if they just had evidence of a King's grant. That bill didn't pass. Currently, and before the bill was introduced, it hasn't changed. In order to prove that you own the salt marsh, you have to go through years and years, generations, really hundreds of years of documentation, and you have to prove to the state that you own the salt marsh. This bill would have flipped the burden of proof to say that the state has to prove that you don't own the salt marsh. That, we were concerned, would cause a massive giveaway. We called it this Great Salt Marsh Giveaway Bill, of the hundreds of thousands of acres that the state has done a really wonderful job of protecting since since we became United States of America, but also since the passage of the Salt Marsh Protection Act in 1970. This session, like I said, there's no bill yet. We don't know actually if there will be a bill, because one of the proponents of this bill in years past, he's litigating his King's grant. His case is in the appellate court, and it's just recently been ruled on, and we're not sure if it's going to be appealed to the Supreme Court. So the future of this bill is a bit uncertain, but we are prepared to continue to work to protect the salt marsh, whether this bill gets introduced again or whether any bill that would impact the future of our salt marsh gets introduced. The one thing about the salt marsh is that we have, well, in the same with the Okefenokee, there are hundreds of thousands of people across the state who can and are willing to stand up and talk to their legislators about the importance of the Okefenokee swamp and about the importance of protecting Georgia's salt marsh, two really, well-known environmental assets of our state. This bill is a new one. We worked on it a little bit last year. It's this idea that the EPD maybe needs some more tools to help them deny permits in order to prevent future environmental harm. So last session, there was a bill that we called the Bad Actor Bill. It was a good bill. It was introduced by Representative Townsend from here in Brunswick, which basically was very short. It said that the EPD director could deny permits based on any applicant's history of violations of an environmental law or regulation, and or any kind of civil or criminal penalties that they may have occurred in any state. So currently, they only are allowed, the EPD is only allowed to consider any of these violations or penalties incurred in Georgia. This bill would have expanded it so that the EPD director has access to information from other states. Last year, the bill didn't get a hearing in the Natural Resources and Environment Committee. This year, we're looking at potential other avenues for moving the bill forward, including maybe seeing if it could be, placed in the Economic Development Committee or another committee where it may have more legs. It's also a possibility that we maybe could find someone in the Senate to start the bill, and that way when it came through the House, it would already have Senate support. But again, since it's so early in the session, we're not quite clear on the avenue yet for this bill, but we're quite hopeful that it will be introduced again. This bill is also, you can imagine this picture actually is from the, oh my gosh, I can't remember the name of the fire that happened in Atlanta in September at the chemical plant in Conyers. This bill could help us prevent these future catastrophes by making it more difficult for bad actors to be able to get permits in the state. That may be obvious from the bill title, but I just wanted to make that clear. And then this last issue that I want to talk to you about really has to do with the water situation on the North Coast. The Hyundai plant, well, first of all, the Florida aquifer, especially on the North Coast, which is, in the counties of Bryan, Effingham, and Chatham, the Florida aquifer has been stressed for many years. And for many years, the water companies in those areas have been looking for water alternatives for drinking water and in industrial water use so that they don't have to pull as much water from the Florida aquifer. As a result, pulling water from any of those resources, pulling too much water from that is risky. And so our goal is to protect both the groundwater and surface water supplies from overuse. When the Hyundai plant was approved in 2017, I guess it was, the state gave Hyundai $2.1 or so billion of subsidies and tax incentives. And they also, Hyundai and the related industries around Hyundai were granted they were granted access to the Florida aquifer so that they could pull 6.6 million gallons per day. That is significant because, as I said, the Florida aquifer was already stressed, and that area already was what we call a red zone, which is a cone of depression in the Florida aquifer, which makes it very difficult for other industries to move in, other people to pull from the aquifer. And of course, the highest and best use for people of Georgia of water is for drinking and not for industrial use. The legislators and the governor have been concerned about the use of water in this area. And so this session, in the governor's budget, it includes $501,700,000 for an amended budget for this year, for this fiscal year, which means, from now until June 30th, to issue loans and grants to transition industry in that area from groundwater use to surface water use. So this means that they're going to, I'm going to move to the next slide, but this means that they're proposing to withdraw 20 million additional gallons per day from the Savannah River. This would transition them, as I said, off the aquifer, but more to pull from the river. It would move the existing water intake north up just to be south of Rincon. It would include money for a new treatment facility in Effingham County. It would expand the treatment facility in Chatham County. And this money would go to build 29 miles of new pipe to connect the system. So a new water pipe from the intake system down to the new treatment facilities in Effingham and Chatham County. This proposal, as I said, it's in the budget. We expect that there will be new legislation to support this line item in the budget that hasn't been introduced yet. It's hopeful and alarming a little bit at the same time. And because there is a lack of, like, the devil is in the details, there's a lack of details. We're not quite sure what studies have been done to see if the impact of the Savannah River has been thoroughly evaluated. We're not quite sure, especially if you combine this proposal with the Savannah Harbor deepening out, down on the other end of the river, whether they've evaluated the cumulative impacts. In fact, I'm fairly certain they have not. And so we're watching this one, and I don't know that we can do anything about it in the governor's budget, but I think that we will need to be doing work on this issue as the joint legislation comes up to support the infrastructure establishment that needs to be created to actually execute the spending of this money. So I know I kind of went through that fast. I wasn't looking at my watch, but the thing here is that, and I want to overemphasize it, I can't overemphasize it, is that we don't have any bill numbers. We don't have any bills yet. It's early in the session. Crossover day isn't until the beginning of March. The one thing I know is that this is all going to change in a couple of weeks. There are going to be more details. There's going to be new issues that come up that we can't predict coming up now. There are going to be bills that we will maybe consider supporting, and there will be bills that we most definitely will consider opposing. And so I'm glad that you're participating in this conversation, because the legislature changes every day. And so the next steps, I feel like, of course, you should ask questions and we should talk about this, but we will be keeping you updated. And so I would love to encourage you to sign up for updates on our website. You probably already have, because you're part of this call. But second, I think it's really important that you find your legislator and you communicate with them. You can do that on this website. We'll send this out in the links after the follow-up, when the follow-up email comes out. So that you can find your legislator, get to know them, email them, send a message, maybe figure out when their birthday is, send them a birthday card, just things like that to make your legislator know who you are, so that when you call them up, they say, oh yeah, I remember when you tackled me in the grocery store, whatever. And so, I think the most important thing to our legislators is to remind them actually that they're not in a bubble in the Capitol, that actually everybody in their community is watching them, everybody is relying on them to vote the right way on the issues that we all care about. Another good way to do that is to come to the Capitol with us. You can come on Capitol Conservation Day, which is March 4th. That is a Georgia Water Coalition sponsored event. 100 Miles participates in it every year. But if you want to come with me to the Capitol one week, or if you are in Atlanta and just want to meet me up there for one day, that's great. I always love having somebody around to help me reach legislators. Another bigger lift is maybe you should consider running for office. I always feel like we need smart decision makers sitting in those seats, pushing the button to vote at the Capitol or raising their hand to vote in the county commission meetings. And so I provided a link that we'll put in the follow-up materials for you if you're considering running for office. And then, of course, the last one is vote. We need the people in the room that are going to make the right decisions that reflect the values of the people of the state. And for sure, the values of this people of the state reflect protecting the marsh, protecting the Okefenokee, making sure that our environment is our water is clean and our water is abundant for drinking and our air is clean to breathe. And also that we're not continuing to have these terrible environmental catastrophes with, permitting violations. So I am going to move to the last slide and turn it over to my team to facilitate any questions and answers.
Awesome. Thank you, Megan, so much for all that information. We so appreciate you covering all that is going on. Like you said many times, it is still very early because this is a dynamic and ever-changing legislative session. We invite you to follow along with us, be watching your email for more lectures and programs coming up in regards to advocacy and how to stay involved and connect with us. We did have a few questions. If anyone has any that are lingering in the back of their mind, make sure you drop those in the Q&A or in the chat. I think everyone should have access to that. But one of them was specifically about the passage of a bad actor bill. Would that be able to apply to EPD's consideration of Twin Pines if it's still within the process of approval, or has too much time passed? Or are they too far along in the process?
That's a really good question. Unfortunately, new bills introduced cannot apply retroactively. And so it would not apply. In fact, early on in the process of the Twin Pines permitting application, the idea of a bad actor bill came up. And because EPD and Twin Pines are so far along, now the coalition that's pushing the bad actor bill is looking at other instances of permit applications or potential impending permit applications that the bad actor bill could apply to. So it's a great question about Twin Pines. It wouldn't apply for their current permit, but we are expecting them, if they get this permit, to apply for an expansion or a new permit to expand their mine, and then it would apply to them after that.
That's a lot of clarity there. A little bit of a follow-up. As a bad actor, are there specific then bad actions that are highlighted in that process that would need to be documented? And how would that be a citizen's role or the EPD's role, or how would that go?
Yeah, that's also another good question. So what the bill said last time, and of course I haven't seen any new bill language, but I don't think it would be much different, is it specifically talks about violations of environmental laws and regulations, which would have to be documented by a state agency.
Okay.
But a citizen could report it if they were concerned about a violation. And then the state agency would go out and investigate, and or any criminal or civil penalties incurred. So again, that would be documented by a court of law.
That's great. I'm going to invite anyone out there in the audience to drop a question in if you have any more still. While we're waiting, I can direct everyone to our website. We do have the legislative section of our website, a webpage on our site that specifically will try to keep you up to date as possible. Like I said, we'll be sending out emails as well. And just to kind of tease or allude to programming coming from my side of things in both Savannah and Brunswick, in the Mid-Coast, and virtually all about advocacy and how to be an advocate and exercise your power. So that's coming up soon, and be looking for those advertised in the very near future.
And I would say I put my email on that last slide, but do feel free to contact me at any time if you have questions or would like to join me in the Capitol. I really enjoy going to the Capitol with our members. I think it's fun. I think it's fun to see legislators' reactions when they see you or meet you. I think this whole process is about building relationships and demonstrating to the members of the House and Senate that 100 Miles is, network isn't just our staff, but it's the people who care about the coast from across the state, including those people who live in their districts.
Okay, and we've got a flood of questions in now, so I'm just gonna kind of do rapid fire, being respectful of everyone's time, try to get everyone out here by 8 o'clock. Lucy Croswell asks, is there a separate Okefenokee Day at the Capitol? Do we have that date yet?
Yep. Sorry, I didn't mention that. The Okefenokee Day is, I think it's February 6th, but let me Google that real quick. It's either February 5th or 6th. Let me Google it real quick.
And I should know that as well. It's on our calendar.
I said it last week.
Yeah.
I don't know why I didn't.
Apologies, y'all. Let's look that up quickly for you. Yep, it's February 6th.
February 6th. Good.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, I did know it, and then I second guessed myself.
Okay. Ruth asked, will OHM be getting involved in the Savannah Harbor dredging issue? What about the formation of a new type of regional local government water council in the North counties? I will let you talk to that,
Yeah.
Megan.
Yeah. Yep. Well, okay, two things. The first is the port. So the port expansion is okay. The Georgia Ports Authority is has reached out to stakeholders to start to try and collect input from them about our concerns, our environmental concerns with the harbor deepening. They have said that they want the environmental groups to just focus on the direct impacts of the harbor deepening, which means the dredging to 52 feet. Right now, the harbor's at 47 feet, and the widening of the river. Um, I just don't think we can only worry about those two things. I think those two things are concerning, but I think we also have to think about what the impact of building a new terminal on Hutchinson Island is going to be on the neighboring communities. What's the impact of raising the bridge going to be? What's the impact of more truck traffic going to be? And so 100 Miles is working with a stakeholder group that includes, I mean, it's huge. It includes other environmental groups, both in South Carolina and Georgia. It includes municipalities. It includes community groups, and we are working together to put our concerns down on paper and to do some good research about how much truck traffic is there now, how much truck is coming, how much it's. I'm getting way into the details because this is kind of what I nerd out about, but like that right now there's two terminals. So there's the Garden City terminal and the Ocean terminal. How much of those containers that come into and out of the port go into and out of the port on rail? How much of it goes out on trucks? How much do they monitor the emissions coming from those trucks? If we have a new terminal on Hutchinson Island, 100% of those trucks are going to be coming off across the bridge. So what's the impact on the communities? And then we're also those are the impact on communities. And then we're also really concerned about what's the impact on the aquifer going to be. I already mentioned the cone of depression. If we're getting close to the aquifer with the dredging, what's the concern about, what's the research being done about potential saltwater intrusion? The other part of this is if we're taking 20 million gallons per day on the upper end, or the middle of the Savannah River near Rincon, which is kind of towards the south, but closer to the middle than down at the mouth of the Savannah River. What does that do to the oxygen levels of the river that are going to be impacted by the dredging? So, all of this kind of needs to be looked at in coordination with everything else. And we're very concerned that, and actually the Savannah Riverkeeper, I was just emailing with her about this tonight. We're very concerned that nobody really has a good grasp on the government side about the total impact to the river. We also know that many groups in South Carolina are concerned about the impact to the river because obviously this is Georgia's action that will potentially impair a South Carolina resource too. So that's all to say that the port is expected to start the scoping process for the environmental impact statement for the harbor deepening this spring. And at that time, we will know more to share with you, and maybe we'll do one of these advocacy information sessions about that as the time draws near. I was involved with the harbor deepening the last time around, and so luckily we have a few people who have either worked with the Army Corps of Engineers, who have worked with the Savannah Riverkeeper, who've worked with the other conservation groups who've kind of been around this block once before. And so I feel much more confident about the work that we have to do on the harbor deepening than I did the last time around. The second question you asked was about, what was it about? The water, it was about the water intake, Eric?
Sorry, yeah. So what about the formation of new type of regional
Yeah.
local government water council?
Yeah. So we don't know what that looks like yet. We think that the legislature is going to put forth a bill that establish a new regional water council for the coast, for the North Coast. We think that it will be modeled after the Atlanta Regional Water Commission, but we're not sure because we haven't seen the language. And as I mentioned before, the devil is in the details. We also think that if they do that, other areas of the state are going to be concerned because it's another level of government, because it's another agency, because, all the things. And also maybe because they're going to be worried about more regulation in their areas. So That is unfolding, and I expect that next week we will know more. This week, I didn't say this, is budget week. So the House and Senate are not in session. It's just committee meetings happening this week to get the House. The House really is focused on the governor's budget this week, and then it has to pass over to the Senate before crossover day.
That's great. We have a few more questions. This one is a really great one from Norman Jacobs. What can OHM do to get legislators from other parts of Georgia to take an interest in the coast and to understand it better?
Yeah, good question. That's where the size and activity levels of our advocacy network are very important. So right now on this call, we have participants from Athens, we have participants from Atlanta, we have participants from the coast, and we really need more people from across the state to be communicating with their legislators. The main thing we can do really is make sure that whether you, like I said on the Zoom, like a minute ago in the presentation, if you live in Rome, you care about the coast. You need to tell your legislator you care about the coast. If you live in Athens, you need to tell your legislator you care about the coast. The coast isn't just a coastal issue. The coast is a Georgia issue. 100 Miles has worked really hard to make Georgia's coast not a regional concern, but a statewide concern, because this is an asset that contributes not just to the habitat that the state people value, but it contributes to our economy, it contributes to our identity, it contributes to our pride. And we need to really make sure that our friends in other areas know who their legislators are and are also talking. And so the best thing we can do, the people on this call, is share the information that we have when we get it so that more people know about it. Good question, Norm. Thank you for asking it.
Yeah, so much of kind of our availability is, behind the scenes, but you guys are out in the community just as much. So having those conversations, sharing those things out, is a great way of being an advocate. Okay, a few more. We have one from Nicholas Zarp. In light of the new federal administration and their stand on the environment, do you feel Kemp will be closely aligned with them, or has he, as he's done in the past, distanced himself and the state from that kind of administration's environmental trends and be, quote unquote, more environmentally friendly than the new administration?
I think Brian Kemp is more environmentally friendly than Donald Trump, for sure. I think our legislators are more environmentally friendly in many ways than Donald Trump. I think that evidence of that is back when President Trump was president and he was proposing offshore drilling off our coast in the Atlantic Ocean. And we, 100 Miles with our partners across the state, organized local resolutions coming from our coastal municipalities. And the legislatures passed resolutions also asking to remove Georgia's coast from the offshore drilling plans. And Buddy Carter wrote a letter to President Trump, and President Trump removed Georgia's coast from that proposal. So I think with the new administration, our best bet is to work with our friends here locally and at the state capitol to communicate with the federal government to make sure that they know what our state leaders want for our state. I think, that's whether it was Joe Biden who was going to be president or Kamala Harris or Donald Trump, I would say that answer no matter what. I think that's always the solution. I think that this year is going to, 2025 is going to be interesting. I think we're going to get our eyes opened as to what the federal government's plans are. I was happy to see that the federal government expanded the boundaries, the acquisition boundary for the Okefenokee Swamp recently. I do not think that will be reversed. So I think we just have to, now more than ever, I would have said this last year too, but and I'll say it next year, now more than ever, we just have to be involved and we have to be active and we have to be educated and reading and communicating and making sure that our legislators and our federal officials know what we want.
Yeah, exactly. And I will just kind of mirror what Megan said. There will be many opportunities upcoming for engaging in those ways, kind of facilitated by 100 Miles and also with action alerts and lots of things like that. So keep update with your email, visit our website. I think we've basically covered everyone's question. Um, Alex DeLeo, hopefully I said that last name right, said just a big thank you for right now. See you at the Capitol.
Thanks,
That's
Alex.
awesome. I want to also say thank you just to all of our members who joined us this evening. It's your support and your presence here that helps us do the work that we do, and we really appreciate you for that. For those of you who aren't members, we appreciate engaging with you this evening and look forward to seeing you in the future at other events and lectures and classes, etc. Um, I don't know. Without further ado, I'd just like to say a big thank you to our 100 Mile staff that was behind the scenes, keeping us going and being support in that sort of way. I was very worried that I was going to lose power, so I'm glad we made it through. It is very freezing rain here right now. It's pelting our window. So, anyways, without further ado, like I said, stay warm, everyone, stay safe, and we look forward to engaging with you in the future. Have a good
Great.
night.
Yeah. And don't hesitate to reach out if you guys have any questions or want to know more.
Awesome. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you.